The Able to Care podcast is sponsored by Able Training Support Limited, who build partnerships with organisations to develop confidence and competence in their team to promote positive outcomes for all. Find the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker. And on this session, I thought we'd cover something that I hopefully will appeal and benefit lots of people out there, whether it be something and a tool you use for yourself or whether it be something that you can support somebody else to use for them. It's a principle called grounding techniques. So I am going to give you my top three or my three favorite grounding techniques that you can use either for yourself or coach others to do exactly the same. So starting off though, some of you may have heard of what a grounding technique is and some of you may not. So basically grounding techniques are strategies used to help individuals stay connected within the present moment, and they can really help reduce certain symptoms of anxiety, panic, or even disassociation as well, feeling shut down, feeling numb. They are particularly useful in managing kind of anxiety disorders and PTSD, as well as other mental health conditions. I refer to them in a few different situations, that whether I'm teaching, but I've also used them myself and used them quite regularly myself to help manage my own emotions as much as anybody else's. So whether you are a caregiver who is looking to improve their self-care and make sure they're looking after themselves and coping with their stress and de-stress, or whether you are helping somebody else to better manage their mental health and their emotions, disassociation and emotional regulation, these strategies can be really useful. So I do use them in kind of behavioral management courses, but I also refer to them in self-care strategies an awful lot. What are they and how do they help? As I said, there's something that helps us stay connected to the present. A common thing when we're feeling a state of anxiety or we're feeling fear is our brain tends to wander either into the past with previous experiences and bad memories, going, what if it's like last time? Or what if it's this is I can't cope like I did last time? Or our mind goes into the future to go, but what if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens? And our brain wanders into those realms of the past and the future. And it can get lost in those spirals. And what grounding techniques help us to do is to pull us into the here and now, to help us to stay fixed to the present and where we actually are, allowing us to, well, one, to distract our brain from going into those negative thought cycles and those negative thought processes, but also to give us a sense of control or an autonomy over the situation. That I may not be able to control what's going to happen or what's happened in the past, but I can control these feelings in a moment or what's going on in this moment. So this is where grounding techniques can be really useful. When they should be used, well, when you're feeling a state of overwhelm. So if ever you're feeling, I'm really stressed, I'm struggling to cope, it could be quite low level, or it could even be to the point of a panic attack. We might be able to use certain grounding techniques to help, again, stabilize us, to help us to feel, because there's no other way of putting it, but then grounded. So I'm going to be using that word an awful lot. So it's really useful. The one thing I would say about grounding techniques is, like any skill, they do require practice. If you want to make them automatic, especially when we're in a heightened state of arousal, when we're agitated, it's a good idea to not just practice these when you really need them, but practice them when you don't. Because if you only use them when you really need them, they may not be as honed, they may not be as automatic, they may not feel as comfortable and easy as if you've been practicing them all the time. Like if I only learned to tie my shoelaces when I was in a panic running out the door, I would have found it much, much harder than practicing slowly, gently and getting used to it and then building up to those times. So I do recommend, if this is something you think could benefit you, whether yourself or others, I promote practice for it. So my top three. The first one is one that actually most people have come across, I should imagine. In fact, probably all of them. They're in a lot of different practices or variations of different forms of practice. But one is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. So 5-4-3-2-1 technique is a sensory grounding technique. And it forces you to engage in kind of all of your different senses. So there's an element of reconnection with all your different senses. You can do these a little bit more simplistically. I have used it before going, come on, let's find 5 blue things in the room when helping somebody else to re-regulate. just getting them looking around and trying to find 5 blue things. So we can do that just with one sense. We can use it in different ways, but the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 goes through all your senses. So the first is that we find 5 things that you can see. Okay. Now you look around and identify 5 different things in the environment. They don't need to be specific. So I could do it now and go, obviously I'm talking to a camera and there's a light there and there's a blind there and there's a clock there and there's for some reason, a roll of tape in front of me as well. Hey, that was only 4 maybe. And there's some keys on the floor. So there's our 5. I've seen 5 things. Next is we're going to do 4 things I can touch. So obviously the 5 things that I've seen, I might be able to touch those too, but I might have to find other things that I can touch in the environment. But this is where I don't need anything, because I could go, I'm going to touch my hair, I'm going to touch my beard, I'm going to touch my shirt, I'm going to touch my fingernails. So we can still find very quickly 4 things to touch. They don't have to be far away or things in the environment necessarily. The next is 3 things we can hear. So we're going to put our listening on and we're going to try any sounds. It could be the sound of our breathing. It could be a slight buzz from a light. It could be a car going past in the distance. It could be the sound of a bird making a noise. It doesn't need to be anything specific. We're just checking around for 3 different things that we can hear and listen to for a moment. And we're just labeling them. That's all we need to do. The next is 2 things we can smell. The last one is 1 thing you can taste. Focus on 1 thing, even if it's something that you ate earlier or some residual taste in your mouth. It doesn't need to be anything specific. We can just find even, again, licking your own hand, something like that, as long as it's clean. Be careful. The 5 things you see, the 4 things that you can touch, the 3 things you can hear, the 2 things that you can smell, and the 1 thing that you can taste. Because you've been forced in those to do that activity, you'll be forcing yourself to engage in all of your senses, and you're forcing yourself to be in the here and now. So it's a nice, simple, quick thing you can do. And again, you get quicker at doing it, and remember the 5 different senses and the number of things you need to find for each sense. Okay, so that's the first one. Next one is a deep breathing exercise. So deep breathing or mindful breathing, it is a case. I know it's very stereotypical as far as, calming techniques are concerned, but it is just being mindful of your own breathing. And my personal preference on this one is what we call square breathing. Now, square breathing, it's a good idea to also trace with your finger. There's a little bit of what we call bilateral stimulation. So there's also a little bit of my physical self and my mental self working together, which is always a good thing to help ground me. Square breathing is I basically trace my finger, and it could be on my leg, it could be on a side. I've even done it where I've drawn it on a wall in chalk for people to go out and kind of use to be outside and away from things. I've actually recommended this as for many people who work in care. Those who smoke go and have a cigarette. Those who don't smoke just kind of struggle through. And it's so important when we're looking at self-care and self-regulation and self-management, when we're working with people, especially they might be in a heightened state of arousal, they may be distressed, they may be finding life difficult, that we need to be okay to let them know that they're safe and that they can be okay too. So having little strategies like this are so important. I'll give the example that I used in the children's home, where the smokers always know the best place to go. So basically I drew a chalk line on the wall and I just taught them to basically trace with their finger across one side of the square, and they breathe in for 4 seconds to the count of 4. Then they breathe out, hold for 4 seconds. Then they breathe out for 4 seconds, and then they hold for 4 seconds. And they just did that 3 times, okay? So they just traced the square, 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds, and then repeat the cycle 3 times. And then I said, then you can go back in. It's just one of those little exercises that so many of us, when we're in a state of stress and struggling, we forget to breathe. But just taking those deep breaths, and actually you could even trace it on your own hand, as I said, or on your leg or whatever, but just tracing those breathing steps, focusing on the exhale and the inhale, helps us again to regulate. But making sure we do that with the physical helps tie everything together more effectively than just focusing on your breathing. The last technique is one I came across in cognitive behavioral therapy. But there's a few different names for it. So it's relaxation technique, and tends to be referred to as progressive muscle relaxation. but I've also referred to it in children's services of sticker spaghetti. There's a couple of different ways of doing this. And what I have actually done, so for those of you who are a fan of the Able to Care podcast, we do have a membership site where you can gain additional content. There's some free courses on there from Able Training as well. And you can also engage in our forum where you can get additional or have chats, ask questions, recommend future episodes and topics you'd like to cover. All available on this membership site. And what I'm putting on there is some actually recorded audio, visual of me doing a script for this body scan or for this progressive muscle relaxation. So if you're not sure how to do it or you find it easier to obviously have somebody talk you through the process, I have recorded that for you and it's available on the membership site. So go on there, visit, find out more about what we do, and that's available for you to listen to, download, and hopefully help you go through this process. So it's called ablehub.uk or abletocare.co.uk will also take you there. So what is progressive muscle relaxation? So basically the idea, the two different ways that we can do it is one, we basically work across our body, starting usually from the toes, working up. We basically tense an area of our body up, we hold it for a while, and then we relax it. We do that systematically through the body, and at the end of it, our whole body feels relaxed. The sticker spaghetti example is you tense up everything, and then slowly you relax as if you are a sticker spaghetti going into the warm water and slowly softening. So within CBT, it's really good for helping people with insomnia and sleeping difficulties to get to sleep. But it can also be used as a grounding technique. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling stressed, I might be able to just do this. Even let's say, sat in the car or sat on public transport, we can just tense up our toes and then relax, tense up our ankles, then relax, tense up our calves and then relax. And we can kind of systematically work up through our body. I said it's quite nice to sometimes have somebody talk you through this so you can focus on the voice at the same time as doing it. But you can just, once you get it in your head, you can use it yourself as well. They are my top 3 grounding techniques as far as the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. So the sensory grounding, the deep breathing or the square breathing exercise as well. And the last one is the body scan or the progressive muscle relaxation. So they are my top 3 grounding techniques. Now, if you are obviously helping somebody else, once you've learned the kind of script for the progressive muscle relaxation, you can coach somebody through that themselves. If they're sat down, you can talk them through and ask them to tense up, relax. You can guide them through the square breathing and count for them to help them kind of in the process. Or you can instruct them to obviously do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So there are excellent tools to teach others or to do for yourself. Okay. Let us know in the comments if you try any of these, how you found them, or if you've got any other grounding techniques that you find really useful and really works for you or that you've heard from anywhere else. Please do make sure you share them. Hopefully as a community, we can pass on really positive skills. Otherwise, like and share. Thanks.